Well, good day. Welcome to Commerce Today. My name's Darren. Josh is here with me as always, and we're going to be talking about PIMs. Now, it's not the PIMs from the Avengers or anything crazy like that, but PIMs and really unlocking that product data for e-commerce success. So, Josh, why is it essential? Why is
Yeah.
it essential for these?
Well, first of all, PIM stands for Product Information Management. So it does pretty much what it sounds like. Helps you manage your product data. Has a very important role in centralizing that product data. And since you had those great questions before when we talked about CDPs, about what's the difference between a CDP, a CRM, and ERP, just figure I'd go ahead and get it out of the way that PIMs, CDPs, and ERPs all kind of feel like they might have some overlap, but really what each of them do is really in the name. So PIMS, it's all about the product data, the product information management. CDP, customer data platform, that's going to focus on your customer data, not really on your product data. And then even an ERP, that's enterprise resource planning. That's looking at like a much higher level of the financial aspects, the supply chain, things like that. So the power of a PIM, really, especially in a composable commerce solution, is being that one source of truth where all your product data kind of flows in and out of, versus those other systems that might touch and refer to product data, but it's not as central. And so, in the world of e-commerce, having consistent, very detailed product information is very important. It will boost your sales. It'll reduce returns. It'll elevate the perception of your brand. So it's obviously very important.
Extremely important, obviously, and like we say often, almost every episode, it's the product information and the specialization as well as the customer journey, of course, and we're really on that product side of things. So you've talked about some of the broader benefits of the PIMS for e-commerce, but I think there's kind of five key advantages that, or maybe four key advantages that you were looking at. Tell us about those.
Yeah, so kind of the five advantages. A PIM, like I mentioned, is the place where you can centralize your data. So you can manage your product details, your specifications, your media files, all in a single place with a single workflow. This gets really powerful, especially some of the PIMs you can easily integrate with your vendors. So they can actually submit product data. You can pull product data from multiple sources, centralize it all on this PIM, and then have a workflow to refine it.
That is very handy.
Also, just great advancements and enhancements for the customer experience. So, like you mentioned, we talk all the time about how important the product data is in that customer journey. When they're on your product detail page, whether you're a B2C or a B2B business, having the right details on that page is really going to determine if those buyers or visitors convert into buyers. Also, by streamlining your product data and how you handle it, you can have a much faster time to market. This is probably the biggest thing I see companies struggle with that don't have a PIM. So they will have product data kind of all over the place, and they're managing it in spreadsheets. They're trying to manage it via their e-commerce platform, and it just takes them so long to get a new product up that sometimes they give up. They just don't even try, or if they're trying, they're spending actually more money on the employees that are having to do all these manual processes to add the product data compared to what it would cost to actually invest in a proper PIM setup.
Wow, talk about a missed opportunity there.
Yeah. And then finally, PIMs can really help you improve your data quality. You can enforce rules and standards. It's kind of like a CRM for those that have worked in a CRM that won't let you advance a deal until you fill out certain fields. PIMs have similar features where you can say, okay, you can't actually mark this product as done until these certain key aspects are filled in, until this data has been acquired. And then also making it that single source of truth, allowing that validation. You then know all the product data that flows out of your business, whether it's onto a catalog, onto a website, wherever it's going, Amazon, eBay, it's all going to be accurate. So, and that's so important these days. SKU counts are growing so fast. People are adding so many products. Catalogs are getting so much more complex, especially on the B2B side. And then when you start looking at omni-channel, if you are going to try to sell both online and in store, I've seen so many times when, and grocery stores seem to be the worst about this, when you go to their site and you search for something and there's no image, there's no, like, it's literally just the, maybe 8-letter abbreviated name of the product that the manufacturer sent when they sent the UPC code, and that's it. People aren't going to buy if that's all you have. So you've got to have that unified source of this product data and push it out in all your channels.
All great things and so key to a successful website or to a successful e-commerce site, of course. Well, you talked about the advantages, Josh. I know that it's going to be important for our listeners to know, gosh, who are the ones to really consider as a PIM for their site and for their needs. And you put together, it looks like there's kind of 6 top players. Let's run through the highlights of those. You want to start with the first one?
Sure. And before I dive in, I will say, just like our CDP episodes, this is going to be a 2-parter. We're talking about the top commercial PIMs today. Next week, we'll talk about the top open source PIMs, because there's also some open source options out there. And just a teaser, some of these will appear in both. And our first one, PIMcore, is an example of that. So PIMcore has a commercial offering as well as an open source offering.
Excellent.
And their commercial offering, it actually integrates deeply with DAM, digital asset management, content management, and even their CDP capabilities. So within one stack, basically, you can not only have the PIM, but also the DAM, the CMS, and the CDP all in one. It's also a very flexible and scalable solution. So I typically see kind of the mid-size enterprises that really want a full digital experience platform, but aren't bought into something like the Adobe Suite. They often will select PIMcore. And then on the tech side, because as we'll talk about, finding a PIM that's aligned with your existing tech stack can be important. So on the tech side, PIMcore is built with PHP on the Symfony framework. It uses MySQL or MariaDB, so very familiar to a lot of PHP developers. And then the customizations for it are done in PHP, or you can do some front-end customizations using JavaScript or Twig.
Very, very cool. All right, next up on our list, I'm afraid I'm going to butcher the name.
Akeneo.
Akeneo,
yeah.
Very good.
So Akeneo, they are very much focused just on PIM. So PIMcore kind of has a little bit of everything, like I mentioned. Akeneo, which also has both the commercial edition and the open source edition, they focused really specifically on PIM. So if you just want a simple PIM solution, they're a good fit for that. Lots of times when I see someone that wants something that's PHP based with great multi-channel support, they'll look at Akeneo. Akeneo, very similar tech stack as PIMcore. So PHP with Symfony, MySQL. They actually use Elasticsearch for searching, and then the customizations are, again, very similar to PIMcore, primarily in PHP.
Interesting. All right. Well, next up on our list, Salsify. I think we've talked about them at one point once before.
We have. So Salsify is a very well-known PIM, and they really focus on what they call digital shelf optimization, being able to manage very large catalogs across multiple channels, especially if you want to have different assortments in each channel. So they tend to be great for retailers and for brands that are really looking at omni-channel and multi-channel e-commerce. They aren't open source and don't have that open source background of the other two. So typically customizations are through the API. You can do some basic scripting in Python or JavaScript, but most of the work you do there is going to be via the API or via connectors. There's connectors into a lot of other platforms.
Interesting. That's a key distinction as we're looking at these. So next up, Sales Layer.
So Sales Layer has an interesting spot in the market because they are very much an enterprise grade PIM. Like they're a big, I don't want to say heavy, but a full featured enterprise PIM. But they really tout the fact that you can go live with them in 6 weeks. So it's still enterprise. It's not a stripped down, simplified PIM like what we might look at next. Full featured enterprise grade PIM, but with a very fast time to market. Also, very robust data management built in and a lot of connectivity to different marketplaces. So if you're one of those larger businesses, you need that enterprise grade PIM, but maybe you think, oh, enterprise grade means slow. Not the case with Sales Layer, and so it can be a good fit there. Sales Layer also is a kind of closed ecosystem like Salsify. So most of the customizations you're going to do are going to be via APIs, mostly via REST APIs if you're a developer who knows what that is. So.
Gotcha. And then next up on our list, Catsy. This sounds fun.
Yeah, so Catsy is a newer player in the PIM scene, and like I mentioned with Sales Layer, Catsy is kind of the opposite. Catsy is that very kind of simplified PIM solution, really focuses on managing your product data, but also syndicating it out into different marketplaces. They're really focused on small to mid-sized brands that are really looking for efficient synchronization of their data into multiple marketplaces. So again, they also are a kind of a closed ecosystem. So any sort of customizations would be just using the API. Their PIM isn't targeted to people that need a lot of customizations. Really, they're targeted more at those that can just purchase it, go live, and use it kind of off the shelf.
Interesting, and built on the .NET backend. That's some fun, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I tend to stay out of the .NET world for sure.
All right, and last on our list of 6, Informatica MDM.
Yep. So Informatica has a number of solutions, and their Product 360 MDM, which MDM stands for Master Data Management, and it's kind of a superset of PIMs in a way. So Master Data Management really is for any sort of data you want to have a single source of truth on. So whereas some PIMs may not want to dive into inventory levels or into other, especially the more financial aspects of product data, an MDM, any data that you want it to be the single source of truth on, it will do that. So if you have a dedicated data team and you're a larger enterprise and you're looking for kind of that heavyweight player in the space and you want to roll out master data management, that's where Informatica's solution really fits. Speaking of environments I stay out of, like .NET, it's actually built on Java, and customizations are via Java typically. It's very Java, Oracle, enterprise type of technology for sure.
Wow, and I was recently talking to our director of IT and getting the difference between Java and JavaScript. There is a significant difference there.
You know, it's funny. When I was back in college, way back when, one of the big differences between the engineering school and the business school, and so between computer science and IT, at least at my university, was computer science would teach like C, C++. IT was all about Java. And neither side at the time said anything about JavaScript. And so it was always kind of interesting. Sometimes I'll even ask people, especially if they went to school kind of the same time as I do, like what their preferred language is. And sometimes that can tell me what their major was or vice versa. But yeah, definitely JavaScript, Java, and C are all different worlds.
Wildly different. Well, Josh, you've given 6 overviews here. We've got some information. What's some guidance on how does someone kind of pick and choose?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is I feel like so many e-commerce brands right now will choose software based on the ecosystem they're in. And what I mean by that is if they already are using a lot of Salesforce technologies, they might go with Salesforce Commerce Cloud. If they're already using a lot of Adobe technologies, they might go with Adobe Commerce. None of these players have a really strong PIM solution. So that's where sometimes the choices, you have more choices, but the choice is a little bit harder to make. And I would say, with my background in development especially, look at your existing team, whether that's an internal team or an external team. Look at what languages your other technologies are already using, and at least narrow down your search to find other PIMs that work with that same technology. That can really simplify your tech stack. Now, don't cut your requirements. Like if your business absolutely needs a feature that is only available in one of these enterprise grade PIMs that's written in Java, customized in Java, you might need to stretch and go to the Java world. But otherwise, lots of times the feature sets are fairly similar. So sometimes the best choice is to look for what aligns with your existing integrations and tech stack. But also, don't just think about what sort of PIM you need now, think about, you don't want to change PIMs really ever, but especially not on the cadence that I see places change e-commerce platforms. You want your PIM to be stable. So think about what could a PIM look like for you in 5 years, and what would your PIM needs be in 5 years. Make sure you're picking a PIM that can kind of grow with you. And that's even kind of a teaser for next week's episode, because I think some of the open source options that also have commercial versions can be a great fit, because you can start out small with that open source version and then upgrade into the commercial version later.
Yeah, that really, really does make sense. Well, as we've kind of come to the end, a little bit of a summary over all of this is really discussing what is a PIM, product information management, and how it differs from CDP, ERP, and those things. Basically, some key benefits that Josh mentioned: data centralization, enhanced customer experience, faster time to market, as well as improved data quality. And then Josh gave an overview of 6 kind of the commercial side of the PIM options. PIM Core being the first one, Akinio as the second, Salsify, Sales Layer, Catsi, and then Informatica, MDM, Product 360 is the last one. And a lot of great ideas that you just shared on kind of the choosing that. So with that summary, kind of bring us call to action and what's next?
Yeah, so if you don't already have a PIM, you really need to be considering one. I think we talk a lot about composable commerce, and I think a good first step into that even is, if you aren't already using a PIM, deploy one, make that your single source of truth for your product data, centralize your product related workflows around it, and then you can start building in some of the other composable pieces around that PIM.
That is very, very key. Well, coming up next, as Josh had mentioned, for next week, we're going to be talking about the open source sides of the PIMs. But as always, definitely reach out to Joshua Warren on LinkedIn. We'd love to spend 30 minutes with you to answer your e-commerce related questions. And with that, as always, we appreciate you being here, and send us any questions or comments. Otherwise, take care. Have a great day.